Hello and welcome back to Ensuring Success 2024. We're so glad that you're here with us. I'm Gail Perry, Editor-in-Chief of CPA Practice Advisor. Before we get started with this session, we'd like to make a quick thank you to our sponsors, and Alexandra's going to do that for us.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you to our sponsors this year. We have ADP, Avalara, BotKeeper, CANOPY, who's sponsoring this session, CPA.com, eFile4Biz, WriteWorks, SafeSend, SureLink, Wolters Kluwer, Xero, and Zoho. Back to you, Gail.
Okay, we're back. Would like to mention that this session qualifies for CPE credit, and in order to get CPE credit, we will provide you with three-digit codes throughout the session. They'll be spaced out evenly throughout the session. Each time we post one of those codes, it'll appear on the bottom of your screen, and you will hear this sound. That's your reminder to pay attention and be sure to write down that code if you're planning on collecting CPE credit for this session. Also, if you have any questions for our speakers, there's a box right under the video screen that you're looking at right now, and it says Ask a Question. And you can put your questions in there for the speakers. If you have any questions for our tech team or any questions about CPE, you can reach our tech people who are behind the scenes here at info@EnsuringSuccess.com. Also, we're up on social media using the hashtag DecemberCPE, so you can check us out there. We'd love to have you post something about us, or take a picture and post it, or take a picture of yourself watching us and post that using DecemberCPE. All right, this particular session is called Accounting Practice Management, All Things Tech. And I'd like to briefly introduce our speakers, and then I'll have them tell you a little bit about themselves, and then we'll dig into the topic. So I'm joined by Davis Bell, Randy Johnston, Brian Tankersley, and my co-moderator, Alexandra DeFelice. So I'll have each of you do a brief introduction.
Hey, I'm Davis Bell. I'm the CEO of CANOPY. I've been at CANOPY for about 5 years now, and before that spent just a lot of time in software. So very grateful to be here with everyone, and very excited to be talking about practice management in the context of accounting firms.
So good day, I'm Randy Johnston. I'm with K2 Enterprises and also have NMGI. So have been doing technology work in accounting firms for over 50 years at this point, and recently just celebrated our 41st anniversary for the NMGI operation with our holiday party this season. Happy to talk to you about practice management. You'll figure out the two guys on either side of me know a lot about it, and I hope I'll bring some to the table too.
Hi, I'm Brian Tankersley. I'm a CPA. I've been with K2 Enterprises for about the last 20 years. I refer to myself a lot as a recovering auditor. So but I've worked in accounting firm technology for at least 25 years. I also have written a few hundred product reviews over the years. So I live, breathe, smoke this segment, and that's a little bit about me. I'm glad to be here with you all, and again, I'm always glad to spend time with you guys.
And I'm Alexandra DeFelice, Director of Marketing and Business Development for Payne & Fears Law Firm in Southern California. I am not a CPA, but I hang out with them on TV, especially for the next 2 days. I do not have a fancy title like some of you do, so I'm going to have to come up with something within the next few sessions.
All right, so we're going to be talking about all things tech regarding practice management in accounting firms. So I'd like to kind of start with what you guys see as the major challenges that accountants are facing right now, that we hope there are technology solutions for. Randy, you're nodding like, yeah, I know about that, so let's go.
Okay, we'll start off and hopefully the guys will fill in along the way. But for, I think all of our firms that are out in the field, you deal with firms all the time, Davis, I believe that you have legacy systems in place in many cases, and it's really time to think about moving forward. You're managing your practices, often tax, many times client accounting services, and the legacy practice management systems just actually don't get the job done. We also think that there's other technologies needed, document management, workflow, and then minor things like due date tracking, which obviously wouldn't want to miss those, or portals. There's so many pieces that I believe belong in a practice management system, and what I suspect many of you are doing is you're actually just trying to make something work instead of being holistic about the needs that you have.
Yeah, I mean,
And I'll just say that one of the things that I've seen is that it seems like we've seen more startups in practice management than we have in just about any segment of the space. It's been a very interesting time for that. I think one of the biggest problems that accountants have is they don't know what they want. Because a lot of people that are partners at accounting firms, maybe they've only worked in accounting firms in their careers, and so they don't know about CRM, and they don't know about document automation and document assembly, and they don't know about integrated. They're not used to a truly integrated document management system with integrated workflows, with that you can customize with business logic and things like that. And so they don't know what they don't know, and so it's hard for them to know what they want. And then they look at it, and the problem they run into there is that maybe it's maybe what one group's definition of practice management is different than another group's definition of practice management, and figuring out how to put this crazy quilt together of all these applications is just well beyond their technology skill set.
Yeah, absolutely. It sort of gives me two thoughts. I think the first is. So we're going to talk about software today, but I think it's important to zoom out and talk a little bit about what is the problem that we're trying to address with software, right? Software is not an end unto itself, right? Just buying software doesn't solve any problem. So I think as we think about what are the problems we're trying to solve with software, I think a couple that come to mind are a talent shortage that we're all aware of. That's not breaking news that there's a dramatic talent shortage in accounting firms. I think related to that is we're trying to address the fact that a new generation has come into the workforce, and they have very different expectations around what kind of tools that they're going to be handed and that they're going to use day to day by their employer, in this case accounting firms. I think three, you've got also different expectations as that same generation have become customers of firms, right? As you're getting millennials now and Gen Z who are using the services of accounting firms, they have a different set of expectations. And then, of course, you have kind of wrapped up all in those things are lifestyle challenges in accounting firms and the desire for them to be able to operate a little bit more flexibly and with greater organization. So I think those are some of the underlying problems we're trying to address with software, which, in one sense are really just how do we operate more efficiently, how can we save time and money and make our jobs a little easier and be more effective in them. And then I think specifically as we get into this conversation around the software, I think it might behoove us, and I think you will each have your thoughts on what is practice management. I think that when I first started at CANOPY about 5 years ago, we used that phrase, and I immediately discovered it meant very different things to different people, and even within a company. And so I think we've actually started using this term firm-wide operating system more often than practice management. And some people that might strike them as marketing gloss. I actually don't think it is. I think it gets at this idea that at the end of the day, you need something that enables you to run your firm. And I think that practice management, the evolution of that phrase, it can be a little confusing, a little ambiguous for folks. And I know we'll dig into that, but I think it's worth just calling out that at the end of the day, a firm needs that operating system, that core system of record and system that gets the work of the firm done, and we can talk about what that is. But those are sort of my initial thoughts.
So you're saying a synonym, well, with more than one word, of practice management is how to run your business.
Yeah, I think that's how most people use the phrase practice management, right? And then you get into it, and technically, and I think historically, it can mean just time and billing, or it can mean other things. But I think we use that term, and I think people increasingly generally use that term to be, what do you run your business on?
And so what is that, right? So you mentioned some things prior to this call. We talked about billing, obviously, scheduling, engagement letters. What else could fall under that? So
yeah, I think I'll tell you our definition, and then I'd love to hear from Randy and Brian. I think I divvy the world up into two broad categories. One is where you actually do the work of accounting, so tax preparation software, bookkeeping software, audit software. That to me is that's when you put your actual trained accountant hat on and you go into those and perform those very accounting specific tasks. To us, kind of anything else that is required to get the work of the firm done is practice management or firm-wide operating system or what have you. But I think anything required to engage with the client, so proposals, engagement letters, and then all the way through payment on the client side, and then on the firm side, document management, time and billing, workflow, and then sort of reporting and insights underneath. That's kind of how we define it.
It almost feels like, having been in this industry meaning the tech industry of the accounting profession, for so long, and talking to you guys for years about this, it feels like there was a lot less words. It was like, you just bought your accounting software. Now it's like all these things, and I can't figure out what I'm supposed to pay attention to, right? So.
And the real problem there, Alexandra, is that, and I think we've got a Venn diagram slide to show, but the real problem there is that different groups classify things as practice management versus not practice, versus something else. So as we look at time and billing and document management and workflow, again, some practice management tools include all three of these, and some just include DMS and workflow, and some just include time and billing and DMS, and some are pure play, just one of those circles. And so the problem here is that, and by the way, we could have superimposed, we were limited in that diagram to a small number of things. We actually had one, Randy and I did together a few years ago, that had 4 dimensions on it. But we could have easily done 8 dimensions because it could have CRM in it. It could have client portal integrated with it. It could have text messaging integrated with it. It could be integrated with email. And as we're looking at those circles and so forth, the problem really is that if you were to take the 50 plus products that Randy's tracking in his database, what you would find out is that they all define it differently and they all touch things different ways. And so it's very easy, if you don't have any domain knowledge and you've never looked at any of them, for you to literally pick a square peg to put into the round hole that you have in your application stack for practice management.
And you might already have a round peg and you don't even know that it can fit in that hole because you're putting it in another hole, right? I'm like getting a little complicated now.
Or you might have a toothpick that has very few of those things.
Yeah. So I think Davis was kind of spot on. If you think about this end to end, what are you going to do for business development? How are you going to engage people? How are you going to onboard them? How are you going to get the PBC, the documents you need to do the work, into your application system? How are you going to get a deliverable out? How are you going to get it to the client? Maybe it's tax and you got to have an 8879. How do you get paid? How do you keep that in the portal for a long period of time? I like to think of more like an end-to-end workflow. So, your question, what's in it? Depends on the firm. You may have all those things in it, or you may have a product that only has 1 or 2 of those things. And that's part of what this session is about. It's like, how do we define it? So your concept about, we're just trying to run the bloody system and we got to do some accounting work besides, right?
Yeah.
Practice management is about making all this stuff work.
And we always, go ahead, Gail.
Okay, we're going to take one, we're not even going to break or go away. We're just going to place on the bottom of the screen the first CPE code for this session. So be sure to record this if you're planning on collecting CPE credit for this session. Continue.
Yep, very well. So I think, going down this a little bit further, there are very specific tools that can do any one of these jobs well. And as Brian said, I keep track of a lot of these. Today in the market, as you know, there's 57 practice management systems as we're seeing it right now. There's 88 portal systems that I'm tracking right now.
And this is your full-time job, okay? So we always scare the people that are watching these because it's like my full-time job is supposed to be to manage the firm. Now, just from this one session, I have to manage 87 different things. How the heck am I going to do this? Who's supposed to help me with this? What's the top priority if I can only focus on
how
one
do
or
you
two
pick?
things? Yeah.
And how do you pick? And that's actually exactly the problem. There's so much coming at you. I don't know how, as a practitioner, you can actually pick the right items. Well, and it will be presented to you in such a way it's very attractive. And I was in a CPA firm this week that said, we bought what we were sold. It doesn't do what we were sold. Mm-hmm. Now what do we do? Because we're 18 months into this.
So what did you tell them?
I said, I think we're going to have to live with this for a little while, and then we're going to fix it. Right? And so that's the problem. This is a pretty big decision, and lots of firms are making it right now. So hopefully over the next few minutes, we'll talk more about how you filter this a little bit, but oh my.
And the real problem here is that it's very much like your search for a significant other in your life. You got to pick. You got to pick somebody that likes to do what you do the way you like to do it. So if you're looking at this now, if you're smitten by the head cheerleader, you better expect that you're going to spend a lot of time at high school football games over your time together, okay? And if you like to read books, you're going to spend a lot of time at the library. And if you like to hike, you're going to spend a lot of time hiking, okay? So it's not as much a matter about you picking the best. It's a matter of you picking the best for you and for what you like to do and what you want to do and what your needs are. And the problem is there aren't a lot of great data sources that you can go to that will tell you that, this is perfect for, again, for the person that likes to watch high school football every Friday night, or this is perfect for the person that does audits. And so it's very difficult to get that information without going to a lot of demos, okay? And God, we take a half dozen demos most weeks trying to keep up with this. And we then still have to kick tires on products so that we can do our podcast, which I'll put a shameless plug in for now. It's called the Accounting Technology Lab, and you can see it at cpapracticeadvisor.com/podcast. It's also in Apple Podcasts, and we have a YouTube channel with it too.
So, I think trying to get to the heart, though, of this, with many of you being from smaller firms in our audience, right now I'm kind of assuming many of you are 20 or less, you probably are running either a dominantly tax product practice or a dominantly CAS or maybe a blend, but very few of you are doing audit. And I will tell you very specifically that there are products that do a beautiful job of managing all three practice areas, but they're probably overkill for most small firms. So this idea of the fit, you have to be thoughtful about what are my deficiencies, what am I trying to manage? So if we go now back to your firm operating system type of approach, what do I need to operate with? And we could run with no practice management system, which some tax shops try to do, billing out of the tax software, but it's hard to keep all the balls in the air. It's hard to schedule the people, it's hard to make sure that you're getting collections done and so forth.
Yeah, I think what we often see is someone they feel this certain sense of chaos, like, it's hard to run this firm. And so I'm just going to run out and grab something that I think may help me do that. And if you're, talk to people, they'll say, I'll get a practice management solution. And I think that is a road to heartbreak, right? I think that, we're leaning on all these dating analogies. I don't know why, but I think,
because you're getting married to it.
Yeah.
You're married to it.
Well, that's true.
It's a
high level
time.
of commitment.
And it costs money to get out of it.
Yes,
right?
yeah. So I think taking a step back and just saying, let's fall in love with the problem and not the solution. What are we solving for, right? Mm-hmm. Where are the pain points? What are we actually looking for? If there's two people in the firm, we probably don't need workflow software, right? We don't need to tag each other on a task when I can say, hey, Randy, where are we at on that thing? Yeah. And so I think but that's a very different proposition if you're an 18-person firm. You probably do need something to help keep track of where things are and who's working on them. So I think being very specific and intentional up front about what problems are we trying to solve and what do we care about, right? What are our parameters and criteria? I think that solves, 80% of the challenges that we see with a lot of these. And then I think, too, you can lean on, this is an industry where there's a lot of really smart people who've done a lot of research. And I think you can lean on vendors. Obviously, they have a vested interest, but I think we've got some good vendors. I would include people we compete against. Generally, I think they care about the profession, as do we. And I think they'll generally do a good job. And then I think you can lean on independent folks like Randy and Brian and others. And there's a lot of good information out there that I think will eliminate about 90% of these problems that we talk about that we see down the road.
So, Davis, the way I'm hearing you say that, and it's actually pretty logical on a small practice management selection, make a list. I've done this for some years. Make a list of 10 or 15 things you're trying to gain and maybe 5 or 7 things you don't want to lose, and use that as your North Star in your selection. Mm-hmm. Okay, so maybe I have at 18-person a document management problem or a workflow problem, but I probably don't have that same problem at 2, and I probably have a much greater problem at scheduling, let's say, with 40 people, right? So again, one size does not fit all. That's probably number one, and no one product does it all out there. That's the other thing to kind of know. So if there was a silver bullet that solved everything, you and I would say this is the silver bullet, right?
Well, and the other thing you have to pay attention to is how it does it, okay? Because so many different products address solving a particular problem this way or that way, and they have a built-in workflow in it and a built-in process. And what if your firm has a legacy process that the partners are not willing to part with? You know, whether it's surrounding due dates or some other arcane piece of stuff. You know, if they're not willing to, you know, if it not only has to do what you want, the way you want, it has to do it also the way you want to do it, so that you get something that feels like, you know, it feels like a, you know, I bought a number of suits that were made for me, and there's a difference in a bespoke suit that was created for you than one you get off the rack. You know, it just feels right from the beginning, and getting to that feeling is very difficult, and it does require a lot of homework. But when it's right, it's right. You know.
Brian, you talked about legacy processes. What about legacy products? So, you know, we know that a lot of them are, you know, the support starts to fall off, the quality starts to fall off. You should probably, but you've been using it forever, and you already have to learn 8 million other things, at least 14 things from the next 2 days from the sessions. How do you know when it no longer fits?
Well, I would just say generally that there's so many legacy products out there that people are using, you know, that are pre-Y2K technology. And the problem with the pre-Y2K technology, of course, is that it's difficult to make that software run and that code run in modern operating systems. And it also doesn't provide the flexibility we need for work from home without going to a hosting company, which is additional expense.
Getting a little too close to this.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's the googly eyes. They're drawing me in. But the thing about it is that we have to figure out what it is that we do want, and again, I would encourage you to think about things, because the world is different than it was when everything ran on paper, and most of these systems were implemented when everybody did everything on paper. I mean, WIP reports, you know, that have signature lines on them and that kind of stuff. I mean, we gotta figure out what our, you know, implementing workflow usually is an early stage of this, figuring out how you're going to track your systems, and then finding a workflow system that matches, and then figuring out how to turn that into billing and time tracking and the management information you want. Now, Ron Baker, my friend, has always wanted to said, kill the timesheet. You shouldn't be tracking time at all. I've always been of the philosophy that I need to know how much time it takes to do this job, so I know how to price it. And I need to know how miserable people are doing a particular task, because we may not want to use that client anymore, even if they're fabulously profitable.
You're talking about your own staff.
Well,
how miserable they are doing.
Well, I mean, yeah, because there's torment that takes place.
Are they telling you this? How can you feel them out? Where they're like, especially the let's not say the younger generation. Let's say the more tech savvy or digitally progressive people that are like, they might leave because your systems are so old.
Yeah, that's right. And you're not able to recognize that you know, these 5 people are really carrying the entire firm, and the other 15 are coasting. And so you really don't know, and it's difficult to figure that out without good management information. And so I would encourage you to talk to other firms. You can see what they're looking at, look at dashboards, look at again what other peer firms are if you're in a CPA firm association.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier.
There are a lot of different ways to do it. But the thing is, you have to get outside of your place. You know, you have to get outside of your firm.
Yeah, if I could just add one thing, I think when we're talking about this sort of kind of in this mode right now, like how do we at the front end kind of, you know, front load all the due diligence and the research so that we can avoid a painful decision later, a painful outcome. I think I would maybe call it 2 things. The first, I think it's essential to realize you're buying a product, but more than that, you're partnering with a company. And I think that those are different, right? If you're just evaluating a product, you're going to go and you're going to do your checklist on here are the, you know, 10 things I really care about and 5, nice to haves and da-da-da-da. But there's an element to this that's around the company that has to do with how much are they investing in the product, right? We've talked about legacy. Legacy is just another way of saying they've stopped investing in the product. And that's a really important one that gets into how are they capitalized and what's their level of our ongoing R&D investment. Every company comes to a point at which they decide to harvest on the R&D investment and they bring that down and increase sales and marketing. So I think that's very important to get into. Another one is implementation and ongoing support. That's a huge element. Again, people tend to fixate on this product, right? But it's worth spending some time going online, talking to peers and colleagues and saying, what happens when something, on April 13th, if I have a problem,
Right.
am I going to call? Am I going to get someone? Are they going to be competent and capable and be able to address my needs?
Especially if you don't have an in-house IT department.
Yeah, which very few of them do. And so I think thinking about the product, critical, but the company as partner, I think is a really critical component of this in addition to that, and one that maybe people neglect a little bit.
Great.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. We'd like to hear a word from our sponsor, CANOPY, and when we get back, we will show you the second CPE code for this session. Don't go away.
The onset of AI and automation and offshoring scared so many traditionalists or institutionalists. Lots of people who do what I do are institutionalists, and change is very scary to them. And so kind of stripping away that fear really has led to embracing some of these wonderful tools like CANOPY.
It's hard to even put into words just how much better it is.
And we got a lot of help and support from the CANOPY team, and that made it even easier.
We can get our hands on things. We can easily dig into it and figure out if there was an issue.
To really be forward-thinking, right? No longer being historians, no longer telling people what happened, but helping them figure out what is going to happen and how would they like to make it happen.
Yeah, my name is Dave Fisher. I'm the CEO of Accountability Services.
My name is Lara Cooper. I'm one of 3 owners at Accountability Services, and I'm the Chief Business Development Officer here.
My name is Ernie Villani, and I am the Chief Advisory Officer of Accountability Services.
Before we considered implementing CANOPY, we had looked at it many years ago. It didn't quite do yet what we needed it to do, so we had something built in-house. I think my biggest concern was probably integration with our other products, but as it turned out, we took 14 products and with the implementation of CANOPY, brought it down to 5, and we're actually getting rid of another piece of software now because we're finding CANOPY handles the documents better than that could. Implementing CANOPY was relatively simple.
That was the fun part, I think, for myself and for Sandy, because we really got to dig into everything the tool could do.
It didn't do everything for us.
And then the things that maybe weren't quite there yet, we flagged because we know how quickly CANOPY makes adjustments.
We basically just sent client lists to CANOPY, and it was a matter of a couple of hours.
Once we just took inventory of how we could use the tool, what it would be replacing, how do we really rein this in for each role, so then it's helping them be more effective in their job. So once CANOPY was implemented and went live to employees, that's really where we could just sit back and use the tool. It really is the easy part.
CANOPY has been such an amazing tool for us to help with our efficiency.
You log in, you look at your admin dashboard, you see what's assigned to you.
Making sure we're not missing anything.
We use it for project management, of course.
Allowing us to have reporting to be able to help with our own success and health of our firm.
So we don't have to go back and dig for, let me find the email that I sent. We can set reminders on it.
That integration and API, and be able to talk to each other in some capacity, it's amazing.
The holy grail has been the communication center in the client profile, because regardless of who on the team sent the email, which could have come from 30 people, did you answer this question? When was the last time we talked to them? Has anyone addressed this? It shows up in that one library. That alone has created efficiencies that I can't even put a number on.
It allows us to evolve and to grow and change as our clients change and as our industry evolves.
AI, automation, and offshoring are no longer just these things that are in the future, right? They're here and they're likely not going away. We have to embrace that.
The decision-making process for us is we sat down as a team and just started whiteboarding out. What does this tool do for us? What are the negative impacts of making another switch? What are the positives? Everything just lined up that Canopy made sense for us in the short term, midterm, and long term.
It really feels like a foundational tool in the business. It's not something you have to think twice about.
I don't like to switch just to switch. I just want to have the right tools for my team and my clients. That's it.
And I feel like over the past 3 years, we've dealt with the scary part, and we're now embracing the power of it going forward. And Canopy, in my mind, is like the leading part of all of that for us.
I don't, at this point, understand why people would use any of the other tools. And that's me just having been in those tools. I've just grown to love it more and more all the time. Great, I think your time. Okay, thanks. Great, thanks guys.
Hi, we're back. At the bottom of your screen, you will see displayed the second CPE code for this session. That bell is to remind you to write down the CPE code if you're planning on claiming credit for this session. Okay, we want to get back into this conversation because it's super fascinating, and Brian's going to pick it up and talk about stability issues.
Yeah, you know, one of the things you have to watch, because so much of the innovation that's taking place is taking place with startups or companies that don't have something else that they're trying to sell you, so they don't have a suite of solutions or things like this. And one of the risks you have, either with them or with even with the big boys, is this product going to be around in 5 or 10 years? And you know, we've had examples of this where, especially with venture-backed companies, one of the hard things is that when we've had private equity buy up a lot of the practice management solutions, and we've had venture-backed startups, and both of those folks do not play around. If they're losing money, they cut their losses and move on. And so, if you have a product that's not making it, then you know, in some cases, you may get notified and have days or weeks, or if you're lucky, a few months to migrate to something else. And that's really difficult, especially if it happens during a busy time of the year. And you know, you just have to know. You know, again, this is another place where it's like a marriage. You know, is this product going to break down and leave me when I need it most?
Yeah, I think that's really wise. I think you know, there's questions you can ask that I think you can suss that out relatively easily. I think, you know, one indicator, size of team, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, if there's 10 people or 20 people, I mean, they may grow, but there's maybe a little bit more risk there. The irony is there's some risk on the flip side, to your point, on legacy products with large companies, because those also get sunsetted sometimes, and you know, you might get stranded on an old version that's no longer being maintained. But I think, you know, size of team, if they are raising funding, how frequently, you know, you're going to want to see funding announced every, you know, at least couple of years, because that's a signal of, hey, this company's doing very well and it's got a good backing from its investors. And, you know, I think those are probably two pretty good ones that I think will give you a sense of safety and security around both investment, because again, you know, a reasonably sized team is going to be one that's investing heavily in its product, as well as just kind of ongoing viability. If it's, hey, you know, we're growing a lot and we've got continued support from the investment community, then I think you're in good hands. I think if, you know, the answers there aren't maybe what you're hoping for, it might be a little bit of cause for concern.
Yeah, and you know, you're actually talking not only about the financial stability, but it goes back to the relational thing too, right?
Absolutely.
Because as you're trying to do your due diligence, first, think about your own firm. If you were losing money, you know, what would you be doing with your clients, and how would you be, you know, trying to address that? With the software companies, we've got a lot of that. And I do know some of the financial conditions of some of these providers, and I want everybody to be successful. But the fact of the matter is, there's only a limited market here.
Yeah.
So there's going to be some winners and losers. And I'm also concerned about some of the products that have been around for a long time that, may not make it to the long haul because there'll may be a decision to say, well, we're gone. And it could be a technology issue. Think about what happened with the transition to Windows 7, 10. We're getting ready to go through 11 and 12. All of a sudden, a product's not compatible and we're not willing to reinvest in it.
Yeah.
Well, and I think we could easily have, like we did with expense reporting tools, where we could end up in a situation where we have, where we have these shotgun weddings that take place, where suddenly they're rolling up.
We are staying on this dating thing,
well,
aren't we?
where they're rolling up 5 or 6 things into one entity, and then they're really just trying to extract value and cover overhead with it. And so it's difficult because a lot of times they're not making good investments into those things.
Yeah.
And so the other problem with that, though, is like in the expense area where I think it was 6 got consolidated, you start looking at what happens in practice management here. It's almost impossible to merge those products together effectively because the base operating system, if you want to think of it that way, not technical, but the way the business works, they're quite different.
Yeah.
And therefore, I can't take product A and product B and successfully put them together. I think very few that I'm aware of out of the 50 plus I would even attempt to do technically.
Yeah.
So we have a much deeper problem. But the other thing that I think you alluded to, most of the time I want these systems to be put in place for 5 to 10 years minimum. So you got to have a financial horizon, a relationship horizon that's going to last 5 or 10 years. Do you want to go change your practice management system again?
No.
I'm thinking not.
I mean, how much money do you want to have to put in the swear jar? Because you're frustrated with this product because you picked a product that was perfect for somebody else. And now you're stuck with this thing for a while, and it just sucks the energy out of you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got to be right.
And I think I agree with everything that's been said. I think it's interesting because I think the other challenge that you run into as people are contemplating this is, and I think we're sort of maybe scaring people a little bit, which I think there's a healthy amount of fear around. Just get this right. On the other hand, this you can do it. This is people are capable of doing this. They do it all the time. They do it successfully. I think if I could summarize, the idea is more just be thoughtful, be intentional. Don't rely on yourself. Go talk to other folks who are knowledgeable, independent vendors, folks in your colleagues in the industry, and I think that if you do that, you're gonna be fine. I think it's just a question of making sure you sort of dot your I's and cross your T's, and then as you do that, I think you'll be okay. It's just more about little due diligence up front goes a long way.
Yeah, I think you're right on that, Davis, and I'm actually thinking of a phrase that Brian has used through the years. People change tax software as often as they do physicians and major world religions. We're not asking you to change your tax software here. That's probably going to remain stable. But one of the things that I think is a broad misunderstanding right now is the benefits of the integrations. There's really, we usually talk about it as a one-suite approach versus a best-of-breed approach. And statistically, in the survey that Brian and I have run for some years, we saw best-of-breed evolving in the small firms first, then best-of-breed evolved in the large firms, and it's coming into the mid-market. So one suite is way less common than it used to be. And I think there's a lot of angst about unhooking my integration because there are benefits when it's done right, but it's rarely done right. And that is a real sad condition as I'd see it. But the new tools help here. And many of you that maybe are attending today don't know that it's easier to hook these systems together now than it was 5 years ago. And there's examples of tools. I can see Brian's kind of, I'll let you pick up from there because I know where you're going to go.
So there are products like Once Accounting out there that is designed, that actually uses a technology called robotic process automation. But you can use these RPA tools like Microsoft Power Automate. They're like macro engines that you have. If you've done macros in Excel where you have a task you need to do 50 times in a row, it'll go in and do it over and over and over every time you hit a keystroke. The thing about robotic process automation is that you can take data out of one system into another and then put it into another, and it can also scrape data from screens, and it can pull data from files and save things. So you can really automate this interface into these legacy systems if you know what you're doing. Now, the beautiful part is that we have low-code, no-code solutions, so it works more. It can work more like a macro recorder in many cases, where you just do the task. It records the commands, and then you go edit the commands to put in, okay, insert this piece of data here, insert this piece of data here, and insert this piece of data here. Or there are even people, I know of one CPA firm, former CPA firm tech manager, that actually has a consultancy in robotic process automation for that very reason, because so many firms don't know that you can go out there and for a relatively small amount of money, you can get a bespoke configuration of a integration between applications.
And maybe even simpler application program interface, APIs. Now that may be a little overstated, but I suspect you have some in your platform,
yeah, absolutely.
right? And so it might be wise for the people to hear about that, because a lot of vendors build these APIs so you don't have to, and you just turn them on and say, connect these two systems, poof.
Yeah, we actually have a question from someone asking how you find someone to help you set up APIs.
Well, so I think the APIs are built into the software, right? So CANOPY, we open up an API, right, and that has to do with the different kinds of information that we're choosing to open up or to share. And then, of course, the other software with which we are integrating has to have those given APIs opened up. And in most of the time, the two companies have prearranged an integration, so it just sort of works, right? You don't have to go necessarily hire a consultant or a vendor. In certain cases, if you want to do custom work where there's, CANOPY's opened up an API for a given set of information, and you want to do custom pulling of information, maybe into reporting or BI or something, then you'll need some in-house capacity, or there's lots of smart folks in the industry. But I think Randy, you hit on a really critical point that there's this concept of a walled garden in software, right? Where I come in and I've got everything, and I don't just mean the firm-wide operating system, right? I mean everything, the tax software and the audit software, and you're a fill-in-the-blank shop, and you only buy software from us, but they build walls around that, right? And so the downside of that approach is then you're sort of stuck with the individual ones, and in some cases, which was historically the case with practice management, it was an afterthought, right? The prime driver and where the investment was on the tax software, and then it was like, hey, we'll throw this thing in, probably not a lot of investment, a lot of thought went into it, and so then folks were feeling, oh man, I like the tax software, but this is not getting the job done for me as I'm managing my firm, my clients. And so you still people who feel hung up on that, right? And I would just say that's just, I wouldn't be hung up on that. I think that the between APIs, between integrations, between other things like Print2, and there's a whole toolkit for dealing with this issue. Whatever practice management provider you choose, you're probably okay because there's a solution for that. And I think the
workarounds are legion, and many of them can be implemented without having to write code. And there are also integration platforms as a service like Zapier or Zapier, I don't know how you pronounce it, Zapier, where they integrate with, I think they integrate now with like 7,000 different applications, okay? And so you can drag and drop in their interface and create a connection if they've got one of the 7,000 things, and you can customize it. And again, to the point here is that when we're thinking about this, the important thing is that you get the tool you need to let you practice the way you want to and to let you serve your clients the way you want to. So we're not trying to get to this is the best practice management system in the world, okay? We're trying to get to this is the best stack of applications for my firm and me.
Yeah, so Gail, to make sure that the API question was answered from the attendee, I think it was, Davis, I think you got it. But the best way to think about those application program interfaces is one or more vendors get together, they agree what they're going to connect, and they work out all the details. So all you have to do as a consumer is make sure that they're turned on both sides, and they auto-magically connect. Now, I don't want to make them sound like they always work perfectly. They don't always do, but they do.
Quite often, you do have to configure the software in a particular way for those things those integrations to work correctly. So you need to read the manual of both applications plus the manual on the integration, so you understand what you're getting into trying to.
And I would say, depending on the vendor, certainly with a company like ours or others of our scale,
read the article.
There's someone's going to walk you through that, right?
Sure.
I want to make sure that we don't just push you off the deep end and
But there are vendors that do push you off the deep end, for the record.
Which is another thing you're going to want to validate up front. But, certainly
you couldn't say that. You wouldn't say it. I would.
But certainly, if you were to come to a company ours or like ours, you'd have an implementation specialist. They would walk you through this. They'd be helping you set up everything, including things like this. And I just didn't want people to feel like they're going to be on their own.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to take 1 second to just display on the bottom of the screen again one more CPE code. This is your third code for the session, so be sure to record that if you're planning on claiming CPE for this. Okay, and we've got just a few minutes left, about 5 minutes or so. So what are our wrap-up key points that we want to make sure we get out to our attendees?
Well, I will start off again, this one. I think, Davis, your point, this is not rocket science to implement. And I think many of you are in smaller firms. I think it's even easier. Mm-hmm. And you probably have lots of inefficiencies in your current ways of doing things. And if you can look to improve your firm's workflows and your billings and your document management storage, perhaps in a single platform, here's one of my key takeaways. Less is more. Fewer tools is better than more tools in most firms. And I find what firms have been doing is they've been going out and getting a splinter in their finger and putting a Band-Aid on it, and getting a splinter in another finger and putting another Band-Aid on it, and another splinter, until they've got a handful of Band-Aids.
Mm-hmm. So you recommend they make a list first of all the things they need to do,
that they need and want to do, and try to do it in as few tools as possible. Now, will you always get the best of every class? No. But will you get adequate? And you'll have fewer tools to maintain. You'll probably reduce your costs. You'll reduce your learning expense. Your implementation time is actually likely to go down. Things will break less often. Less is more. And I've been on that mantra, I think, for probably 5 years. I know I started pre-pandemic, just to give it a perspective.
Okay.
So this isn't like new, but it is important and seems to be getting missed by a lot of firms. I don't know why.
And one way to surface that, if you're not sure how you're going to start, is just to have everybody write down what they do, write down what the process is, and commit it to a document, and then look at that and see what fits among the things that you need to do. Again, you see we do this in this system, this and this, and what'll surface is that there's a whole need to get data in from e-filings, and there's a need to connect to the post, to print out stamps for your stamps.com thing, and to print out labels to ship things, and there's a need for all different kinds of things that you never really thought about in this practice management system that's in these processes that you're documenting. And it's great when somebody turns over too, because then you can say this is how it works.
But it's going to get a little worse, because you probably are going to have bought a bunch of stuff where more than one thing is done by more than one system.
Right.
And all of a sudden you realize, well, I'm paying for all these things and I've got 4 places I can do it. Which one's the best place to do it in? You're going to surface that in that process too.
Mm-hmm. Or the flip side, right, where you might have bought this ancillary product that only does one thing, and now your vendor of something else has added that product, right? So you have to, again.
Yeah, if you're not thoughtful, I mean, like the movie in The Christmas Story where they've got all the cords from everything plugged into one thing and it catches fire. I mean, you can certainly run into that. I think my maybe takeaway, I mean, be careful, do your due diligence, consult with others, very important. But I think, on the flip side of that, I think I would say change is hard, but it's worth it at the end of the day. And I think when people think about switching the system with which they run their firm, they fall into that. We all fall into it. We all have that task or that job. We're just, we're putting off, and we put it off, and we put it off. And then we do it, and it might not have been fun, but it's about 5% as hard as we thought it was going to be, and we wonder why on earth did we put that off as long as we did when we see the benefit. And I think that's our experience. I mean, we talk to firms who've been talking to us about switching to us for 5, 7, 10 years even. And the refrain is always like, oh man, I can't believe I put that off as long as I did. So I think you can do it. If it's a vendor that you want to partner with, they'll help you. You're not going to be on your own, and it's not, there's a decent amount of work and change management involved, but it's dramatically worth it. Particularly, I think, in this new era with all these changes and higher expectations from employees and clients, I think, and the ability and freedom it creates and the way it improves the lifestyle of folks at the firm, and the service you're able to offer to your customers, it does end up being very worth it. It just, takes a little bit of work.
Yeah, and Alexandra, your point was actually spot on. So many people have implemented tools that just need to go away because the vendors added that feature, and they're paying for that extra stuff they don't need. One little twist on that, though, if it's a client-facing tool, I only like to change client-facing tools infrequently. I usually use the word 5 years. So I want to be real thoughtful if I'm taking something that's client-facing. And there are tools that are well-known that I'm regularly removing from CPA firms right now because even though we bought these and they're being used, the practice management system has added those features and there's no reason to have those as separate tools anymore. So we simplify life by doing that.
I think generally one of the things, again, we have to be very careful about when we're looking at this is that I think one of my favorite bands is Rush, and in their song Free Will, they say, if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice, okay? And that's the thing about this delay thing with this. You've got to get yourself and your partners excited about making this change, and that's hard. But you have to do it because the generation that grew up with cell phones is not going to accept a piece of software that was created to solve problems on paper when text messaging didn't exist. They're just not going to accept it. Okay, so if you don't solve it, it's going to start to hurt you in recruiting and in client management and in so many other areas.
Yeah, you're right. Team member and client experience improve almost always in these practice management systems. It's part of the reason I'm so excited about people replacing, and we have never seen a greater velocity of practice management replacements than the last 18 months.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of this that's associated with just folks, at the partner level who are, moving on, and you've got a new, generation of folks that are really wanting to go after it and modernize, and it's super fun and exciting.
Yeah, one of my favorite examples of that this year was 3 retiring 60-year-olds replaced by 3 new 30-year-old partners, and what they've done in the last 6 months. Oh my, it's such a pretty thing.
And what I would say here is that we have, for those partners that don't want to change, I'd just say that generally you have to remember that you need to build the firm that the people that are buying you out want, so that they continue to buy. Mm-hmm. They have a viable firm that will pay your buyout. And so you have to do that, because if you don't do it, you're going to be sad. I mean, because then nobody may want it, and then you're going to be out there working, dying at your desk. Nobody
and you'll be
that.
single too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. This is a lot to absorb, and I hope all of you got a whole lot out of this session. We really appreciate CANOPY for sponsoring this session, all of you for sharing your incredible expertise. We did have some people comment asking us to repeat the name of the podcast, which Randy and Brian do, which is the Accounting Technology Lab, and it is available on CPA Practice Advisor's website. We are going to take a brief break and then return. We're sticking with the tech theme for the rest of the day today. Our last session today will be generative AI. You've probably heard of that, or you've probably at least heard of ChatGPT, which seems to be the ubiquitous name these days that's being applied to generative AI. Generative AI and your accounting firm. So we'll see you at the top of the hour with that session.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.